My name is Elena Carter, and 3 weeks ago, my aunt tried to steal my designer dress in front of our entire family. Not borrow it, not ask for it. She tried to claim it as hers, and if I hadn't kept one small thing, a receipt and a security video, she might have gotten away with it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened that night, take a second to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always find it interesting how stories like this connect people from completely different places. Now let me take you back to where this actually started, because the dress wasn't just a dress. It was the first expensive thing I had ever bought for myself, and the person who tried to take it from me had been quietly taking things from our family for years. I'm 27, and I work as a freelance graphic designer, which basically means two things. I spend most of my time staring at a screen, and for the first few years after college, money was always a little unpredictable. Nothing dramatic, just the normal early career grind. Cheap furniture, secondhand clothes, and a closet full of things that were good enough. I wasn't unhappy, but I definitely wasn't buying designer anything. Then about a year ago, something finally shifted. A small startup hired me to redesign their entire brand identity. The project went well, they grew faster than expected, and suddenly my work started getting attention online. Within a few months, new clients started coming in through referrals. My workload tripled, my savings slowly started growing, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I was constantly catching up financially. For months, I told myself to stay responsible, pay down things, save, invest. Do all the sensible adult stuff people always talk about. But one afternoon, I was walking through downtown and passed a small boutique I'd seen 100 times before. In the front window, there was a dress. I had noticed it weeks earlier, but never allowed myself to seriously consider it. It was a deep emerald green evening dress. Simple, elegant, the kind of design that doesn't scream for attention, but somehow commands it anyway. Every time I passed the store window, I slowed down without realizing it. One afternoon, I finally walked inside. I told myself I was just curious, just looking. The boutique owner greeted me politely and asked if I wanted to try anything on. Before I could stop myself, I pointed at the dress. When I put it on and looked in the mirror, something strange happened. For the first time in years, I didn't see someone struggling to keep up with life. I saw someone who had actually built something for herself. It wasn't about the price tag. It was about the moment. The feeling that I had earned something nice through my own work. The dress fit perfectly, the emerald fabric catching the light every time I moved. I stood there for a full minute just looking at myself before finally nodding and telling the boutique owner I'd take it. She wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and placed it in a garment bag like it was something fragile. I remember walking home holding that bag and feeling oddly proud. Not because it was expensive, but because it was mine. The dress stayed in my closet for weeks after that. I didn't want to wear it to something random. If I was going to wear it, it needed to be for something special. Then my cousin Lily announced her engagement party. The whole family was invited. It was going to be one of those large gatherings where everyone shows up, everyone talks too loudly, and the same stories get repeated over and over again. I figured it was the perfect moment to finally wear the dress. Now, if you've never had a relative who treats every family gathering like a performance stage, consider yourself lucky. My Aunt Marianne has always been that person. She's charming in public, funny, confident, and incredibly good at drawing attention without appearing like she's trying to. People tend to love her at first meeting. She tells dramatic stories, laughs loudly, and somehow manages to turn every conversation back toward herself. Growing up, my mom used to say something about Marianne that I didn't fully understand until much later. She once told me quietly, "Some people collect compliments. Your aunt collects other people's things." When I was younger, I assumed she meant borrowing jewelry or shoes and forgetting to return them. As I got older, I realized she meant something deeper. Marianne had a strange habit of blurring ownership. borrowing things and never giving them back, claiming gifts had been meant for her, retelling other people's accomplishments as if they were part of her own story. Most people brushed it off because confronting her was always more exhausting than ignoring it. 2 days before Lily's engagement party, I took the dress out of my closet to try it on again. It still fit perfectly. The fabric shimmered softly under the bedroom light, and for a moment, I just stood there smiling at my reflection. It felt like a small victory, something I had worked toward without even realizing it. That was when I heard footsteps in the hallway. A second later, the bedroom door creaked open. I turned around and saw my Aunt Marianne standing there. She must have come by to drop something off for my mom and decided to wander upstairs. Her eyes immediately locked onto the dress. She didn't even greet me. She just stood there looking at it, tilting her head slightly like she was inspecting something familiar. Then she smiled slowly and said something that would start the entire disaster. "Oh my goodness," she said casually. "That looks exactly like the dress I bought last month." And in that moment, I realized my aunt wasn't just admiring my dress. She was already preparing to take it. When my Aunt Marianne said the dress looked exactly like the one she had bought last month, she said it so casually that for a moment I thought she was joking. I laughed a little and said, "Well, I guess you have good taste then." But Marianne didn't laugh back. Instead, she stepped further into my room, her eyes still fixed on the dress like she was studying every detail of it. Then she said something that immediately made my stomach tighten. "Where did you get it?" she asked. I told her the name of the boutique downtown. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw something flicker across her face. Not surprise, not admiration, something closer to calculation. She nodded slowly, walked a small circle around me, and then crossed her arms. "That's interesting," she said, "because that's exactly where I bought mine." Now, that would have been perfectly possible if she'd said it normally. Plenty of people shop at the same stores, but the way she said it felt different. There was a strange emphasis on the words, "I bought mine," as if she was planting a flag in the conversation. I shrugged it off at the time because arguing over something so small felt ridiculous, so I simply said, "Well, this one's mine. I just bought it a few weeks ago." Marianne smiled again, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they've already decided something and are just waiting for the right moment. "Oh, I'm sure," she said lightly. "It's just funny because mine looks exactly like that. Same color, too." Then she left the room. At the time, I thought the interaction was odd, but nothing more than that. I finished getting ready for the evening, hung the dress carefully back in my closet, and didn't think about it again. If I had known what she was planning, I would have locked my door. The next day, I spent most of my time working from home, finishing a branding project for a client who was launching a new clothing line. Around mid-afternoon, I decided to take a quick break and grab a coffee from the cafe down the street. I was gone maybe 25 minutes. When I came back, the house was quiet. My mom had gone grocery shopping and my dad was still at work. I walked upstairs to my room, set my laptop bag down, and opened my closet to grab a sweater. The dress was gone. At first I assumed I had moved it somewhere else. I checked the back of the closet, the garment rack, the laundry basket. Nothing. My chest tightened slightly as I opened drawers and moved hangers around. The garment bag that had been holding the dress was missing too. I stood there for a moment trying to remember if I had taken it somewhere and forgotten. Then I remembered Marianne standing in the doorway the day before. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but something didn't feel right. I went downstairs and checked the front hallway. The security camera mounted near the entryway blinked quietly in the corner. I had installed it months earlier after a neighbor's package was stolen. It recorded motion near the door and hallway throughout the day. Normally I never checked it, but something about the empty space in my closet made me pull out my phone and open the camera app. The timeline showed motion detection about 10 minutes after I had left the house. I tapped the clip. The video started with the front door opening slowly. And there, walking inside like she owned the place, was my Aunt Marianne. She looked around quickly before stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Then she walked straight down the hallway and up the stairs. The camera couldn't see inside my room, but it captured something even more interesting when she came back down a few minutes later. She was carrying my garment bag. I watched the clip twice, just to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting what I was seeing, but there was no mistaking it. She walked out the front door, holding the same bag that had been hanging in my closet that morning. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the screen. My first instinct was anger, but that quickly shifted into something else. Curiosity. Because if Marianne had taken the dress, she had done it with absolute confidence, which meant she probably believed she could get away with it. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't planning to hide the dress. She was planning to wear it, and there was only one place she could possibly do that. Lily's engagement party the next night. The thought made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because the entire situation suddenly made sense. Marianne wasn't just borrowing the dress. She was planning to walk into a room full of relatives wearing it and casually claim that it belonged to her all along. If I showed up without it, her story would become the truth by default. Most people, when faced with something like this, would call the person immediately and demand the item back. I didn't. Instead, I sat down at my desk and downloaded the video clip. Then I opened the email from the boutique where I had bought the dress and found the digital receipt. If Marianne wanted an audience for her little performance, I was more than happy to give her one, because the next night, when she walked into that party wearing my dress and smiling like she always did, she was going to learn something she'd apparently never learned before. Some people keep receipts, and some people keep evidence. The next evening, Lily's engagement party was being held at a small event hall just outside the city. It was one of those cozy venues with warm lights strung across the ceiling, soft music playing in the background, and long tables covered in white linen. By the time I arrived, most of the family was already there. I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses before I even stepped through the door. I had spent most of the afternoon thinking about what to do. Part of me considered confronting Marianne privately before the party even started. I could have called her, demanded the dress back, maybe avoided the entire scene. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wouldn't solve the real problem. Marianne had been quietly pulling little stunts like this for years, borrowing things without asking, twisting stories until people weren't sure what the truth was anymore. And because everyone wanted to keep the peace, no one ever called her out publicly. So she kept doing it. But this time she had taken something that was undeniably mine, and she had taken it on camera. Which meant for once, the truth wasn't just my word against hers. I walked into the hall wearing a simple black dress instead of the emerald one. A few relatives greeted me as I stepped inside. My cousin Jake waved from the snack table. My Uncle Robert was already deep in conversation with my dad, and Lily stood near the center of the room greeting guests with that excited, slightly overwhelmed smile people always have at engagement parties. Everything felt normal, almost too normal. For a moment I wondered if maybe Marianne had changed her mind. Maybe she had realized what she did was too obvious and decided not to wear the dress after all. Then the front doors opened again, and there she was. My Aunt Marianne walked into the party like she was stepping onto a red carpet. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup carefully done, and draped around her like she had owned it. Her entire life was my emerald green designer dress. The same dress, the same fabric, the same cut, the same subtle shimmer that caught the light every time she moved. A few relatives immediately noticed and started complimenting her. "Wow, Marianne, that dress is gorgeous. Where did you find it?" She laughed lightly, waving her hand as if the attention was nothing new. "Oh, this old thing?" she said with a smile. "I picked it up at a little boutique downtown last month." The words were so smooth, so confidently delivered, that if I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her myself. I stood near the back of the room watching quietly as she greeted people, hugged relatives, and accepted compliment after compliment. Every now and then, her eyes flicked across the room toward me, and each time she gave a small smile, not a friendly one, more like the smile of someone who thought they had already won. About 20 minutes later, Lily clinked her glass gently to get everyone's attention. People gathered closer as she and her fiancé stood together to thank everyone for coming. It was the usual sweet speech about family, love, and the excitement of starting a new chapter. Everyone applauded when they finished, and the music started up again. That's when Marianne made her move. She walked across the room toward the small group where I was standing with my parents and 2 cousins. Her heels clicked softly against the wooden floor as she approached. A few people turned to admire the dress again. Then she stopped right in front of me. "Well, hello, Elena," she said sweetly. "You look lovely tonight." "Thanks," I replied calmly. Her eyes drifted down briefly to my plain black dress, then back up again. "You know," she said casually, loud enough for the people around us to hear, "I thought it was funny when I saw you wearing a dress just like this the other day." A few relatives nearby looked between us with curiosity. I tilted my head slightly. "Just like that one?" "Yes," she said with a light laugh. "The exact same design. Same color, too. For a moment, I almost thought you had my dress." The way she said it was subtle, but deliberate. The implication hung in the air before anyone could question it. That I had somehow been wearing her dress earlier in the week. My cousin Jake frowned slightly, trying to piece together what she meant. Marianne smiled warmly at everyone around us and continued. "But of course I realized that would be impossible. I've had this one for weeks." There it was, the lie fully planted. Several relatives nodded casually, already accepting the story without thinking much about it. Marianne looked at me again, clearly expecting me to either stay quiet or awkwardly laugh it off. Instead, I reached into my purse, because Marianne had spent years perfecting her little performances. What she didn't realize was that tonight, the audience wasn't just watching her. They were about to watch the evidence. For a moment after Marianne finished speaking, the small group around us went quiet. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence yet, just the kind of pause people make when they're trying to understand a strange comment. My cousin Jake looked from Marianne to me, clearly unsure if this was some kind of joke. My mom shifted slightly beside me, her expression tightening in the way it always did when she sensed one of Marianne's little performances starting. Marianne, meanwhile, looked completely relaxed. She smoothed the fabric of the emerald dress with both hands, letting it catch the light just enough for everyone nearby to admire it again. Then she gave me that same confident smile, the smile of someone who believed the story had already been accepted. "You know," she added casually, glancing around the group, "Elena tried on something very similar the other day. Same boutique too, apparently. Funny coincidence." A couple of relatives chuckled politely. No one wanted to turn a small comment into an awkward scene. That was exactly how Marianne always got away with things. She planted a version of the story so lightly that by the time anyone questioned it, everyone had already assumed it was true. But this time I wasn't planning to let the moment drift away. I calmly reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "Actually," I said gently, "that is a funny coincidence." Marianne's smile widened slightly, as if she thought I was about to agree with her. "But there's just one small problem with that story," I continued. A few heads turned toward me. Marianne's expression didn't change yet, but I saw a flicker of curiosity cross her eyes. "What problem?" she asked lightly. I unlocked my phone and opened the photo folder where I had saved the boutique receipt earlier that afternoon. "Well," I said, holding the screen up slightly so the others could see, "this is the receipt from the boutique." My cousin Jake leaned closer first. The receipt clearly showed the boutique's name, the date of purchase from 3 weeks earlier, and the exact description of the dress. "Wait," Jake said slowly, squinting at the screen. "That's the same dress." "Yes," I said calmly. "The one I bought." The small group around us leaned in a little more now. My mom stepped closer, reading the receipt carefully. Marianne let out a soft laugh. "Oh, Elena," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "That doesn't prove anything. Lots of people buy the same dress." She was still smiling, still trying to keep control of the moment. And for a split second, I almost admired the confidence, but I hadn't finished. "You're right," I said. "Lots of people do." Then I tapped my screen again. "But not everyone breaks into someone else's house to take it." The words landed like a dropped glass. Jake blinked. My mom's eyes widened slightly. Even the cousins standing nearby leaned closer, suddenly paying full attention. Marianne's smile froze. "What?" she said quickly. I turned the phone toward them again and pressed play. The short video clip from the security camera began to play on the screen. The hallway appeared first. Then the front door slowly opened. And there was Marianne. Clear as day. She stepped inside the house, looked around the hallway, and walked upstairs. A few seconds later, the video showed her coming back down the stairs, holding the garment bag. My garment bag. Jake's eyebrows shot upward. "Wait, is that—" "Yes," I said quietly. Marianne's face had gone completely still now. The video ended with her walking out the door carrying the bag. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The room around us was still filled with music and laughter from the rest of the party. But inside our little circle, everything had gone silent. My dad leaned closer, staring at the phone. "That's yesterday afternoon," he said slowly. "Yes," I replied. Marianne finally found her voice again. "Oh, please," she said sharply. "That doesn't prove anything. I was just picking something up." "From my closet?" I asked calmly. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because for the first time since the conversation started, Marianne didn't have a smooth answer ready. Jake looked at the dress she was wearing, then back at the phone. "Marianne," he said carefully, "is that the same bag you're carrying in the video?" No one needed to answer that question, because the emerald fabric shimmering under the party lights was already answering it for her. Marianne's confident smile had completely disappeared now, and the small performance she had planned for the evening was beginning to collapse right in front of everyone. But the real twist of the night was still coming. For a few seconds after the video ended, no one said anything. The music from the other side of the hall was still playing, glasses were clinking, and people were laughing at nearby tables, but inside the small circle around us, everything had gone quiet. My Aunt Marianne stood completely still. Her eyes moved from my phone to the faces around her and then back to me. For the first time since she walked into the party, she looked uncertain. The confidence she had been wearing all evening was starting to slip. My cousin Jake was the first one to break the silence. He pointed toward the phone still in my hand and said slowly, "Marianne, that's literally you walking out of Elena's house with the dress." My dad stepped a little closer and looked at the screen, then at the emerald fabric she was wearing. His voice was calm, but serious when he asked, "Is that true?" Marianne let out a short laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to brush something off before it gets worse. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said quickly. "You're all overreacting. I told Elena I might borrow it." I tilted my head slightly and answered calmly, "You didn't tell me that." She waved her hand dismissively as if the detail didn't matter. "Well, maybe I forgot to mention it properly," she said, her tone sharpening. "But it's not like I stole it." The problem with that explanation was that everyone had just watched the video. There had been no phone call, no message, no conversation. Just Marianne quietly letting herself into the house and leaving with the garment bag. Jake crossed his arms and looked at her carefully. "You didn't ask her, though," he said. Marianne's eyes narrowed slightly, and she replied with a small shrug. "It's just a dress," she said sharply. "You're all acting like it's some kind of crime." My mom spoke then, her voice calm but firm. "It's not about the dress," she said. "It's about the fact that you walked into someone else's house and took something that wasn't yours." By now, a few more relatives nearby had started noticing the tension and were quietly watching. Marianne glanced around the room and clearly realized that more people were paying attention than she expected. Her tone changed suddenly. She looked back at me and softened her voice. "Elena," she said gently, "if this upset you, you should have just called me. I would have given it back." I almost laughed when she said that, because now the story was changing again. A few minutes earlier, the dress had supposedly been hers. Now it was something she had simply borrowed. And if I had stayed quiet, that would probably have become the version everyone remembered. But the video had already done the talking. Jake shook his head slowly. "You didn't borrow it," he said. "You walked in and took it." My dad sighed quietly and looked at Marianne again. "Marianne, you should probably give Elena the dress back." For a moment it looked like she might argue again, but then she noticed something else. Nearly everyone standing nearby was watching now. The attention in the room had completely shifted. The admiration she had been enjoying earlier had turned into something else entirely. Without another word, she turned around and walked quickly toward the hallway near the restrooms. About 5 minutes later, she returned. This time she was wearing a long coat over her arm, and folded across it was the emerald dress. She stopped in front of me and held it out stiffly. "Here," she said. There was no apology, no explanation, no attempt to fix the situation. Just the dress. I took it calmly and nodded once. "Thank you," I said. Marianne didn't respond. She grabbed her purse from a nearby table, muttered something about not feeling well, and walked straight toward the exit. A moment later, the door of the event hall closed behind her. Jake exhaled slowly and let out a quiet whistle. "Well, that escalated fast," he said. My mom shook her head slightly but smiled at me. "I'm glad you kept that receipt," she said. Jake nodded and added, "And the camera." I looked down at the emerald dress folded in my arms. The moment felt strangely calm, not dramatic, not triumphant, just settled. For years, Marianne had gotten away with little situations like this because nobody wanted to challenge her version of events. But sometimes the truth doesn't need a long argument. Sometimes it just needs a receipt and a camera. The rest of the evening slowly returned to normal. Lily's party continued. The music grew louder again, and people drifted back into their conversations. Every now and then someone would come over, glance at the dress in my hands, and shake their head in disbelief. A week later, I finally wore the dress properly to a small dinner with friends. And somehow it felt even better knowing that this time, no one was going to try to claim it as theirs. If stories like this remind you that quiet evidence can speak louder than loud excuses, there are plenty more moments like this waiting to be told. And if you stayed with this story all the way to the end, you already know where you can find the next one. Right here at Silent Revenge Lab.